we have our another episodes, and we will discuss on US6, very very popular episode. And everybody know that already World Talent Economy Forum, we are working with different medias, and hopefully in the futures this US6 become very popular uh, movies and something like that, because we see that especially we are working with millions of entrepreneurs, I want to say, because we are integrating with different universities, government agencies, central bank, stock exchange commissions. uh, it's the largest revolutions, and we find from the youth community, from the industry, that US6 is very very important, because the media and the youth people, they love to know more about AI. And this discussion actually help us a lot to grow a knowledge oriented society. So first I would like to give chance Mr. Tom Rose.
Yeah, again, thanks for doing this series about the books. Really appreciate it. And so far, we've talked a lot about the mathematics process that I used to write the first novel written for AI, and the effects that has had on human readers. And we've talked a lot about that. The one thing we haven't yet really talked about are the stories embedded in the books themselves. And so I realized last week that there are 6 Tuesdays between now and November 1st, 2022. Now, this isn't a spoiler because this comes up in the first page of the first chapter. But I decided when I wrote the first book back in 2007 that the protagonist's death day, the day that he would die, would be November 1st, 2022. And so we've got 6 weeks before that happens in the story. And so I thought we would use the next six episodes to talk about the six books. And again, beginning with the first book, The Lord's Player. And so I can go into a little bit of the background of how that started. And but of course, we can take this conversation anywhere it fractally spirals. And so just as some background, the whole reason the whole US6 thing happened, other than the overall agenda, was back in 2006, 2007. I wanted to do a father-son project with my son, who was a teenager at the time. And he's very creative. And I wanted to spend a summer doing some sort of father-son creative project together. And so we decided to write and do this film, which later became a 30-minute short film called The Unveiling. And I can link to it later. But it was just a great project. We kind of wrote it on the fly. We took the camera with us, and that next year or so, we managed to travel to places as vacations to places like Mexico and Spain. And so it's funny in that this little short film at the end, it has all these exotic locations in the credits. We just took the book along with us as we vacationed. And so we created this story, and it's called The Unveiling. And it was really the genesis of all the books. And so after that project was done, we wrapped it. They all lost interest. I used my whole family, my sons and my wife, and we created this whole story out of it. And then they all lost interest and moved on to other things, but I didn't lose interest. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll make a sequel, because I really enjoyed this process of making a film. And so because nobody was joining me, I made it about some guy in the middle of nowhere on his own. You work with what you got. So I started filming. I started going out to the middle of nowhere in Colorado and writing this story about this character later in life. And I had all this footage on this external hard drive. And of course, it died. And so while I was waiting to save money to resurrect this hard drive, which would have been a couple grand, I started writing out the story. Normally, I like to just film these things on the fly and kind of make the story up as I go along, and just and get it in editing. And so that's what I did. So while I was waiting for this hard drive to resurrect, I started writing out the story, and I really enjoyed that process of writing it out. And so that became book one, the US6. Book one is called now The Lord's Player. All of the books have a sacrilegious title, because it's more of a Gnostic version of some of the common themes that we know about in the Bible. So that really was how it started. I really enjoyed writing the book, and so book one itself is a standalone story. You don't need to read the rest of the hexology to get anything out of the first book. It's a great standalone story. It's a self-contained unit, and I just put the Kindle version up live this weekend, so that'll be available now too. And so, but the story is really just about Emmett Archer, who is the character from the movie that we did, the short film, and it just takes place out in the middle of nowhere on US6, US Route 6. Now that's the reason for that title is the US6 refers to the US Route 6, which is the highway that spans across the country, and from like Boston or from Massachusetts to Long Beach, California. And it's just this whole story of this kind of post-apocalyptic kind of version, and it just fans out from there. And so that's kind of the genesis of the story, and the whole book was doing this father-son project, and then them losing interest, and then me continuing on, and tribulations that happened from there. Might want to mute Brett. Anyway, so that's the story of it. Now, the actual story is of this character, and it takes place around this time in the future. Now, I wrote this in 2007, but the story takes place in 2022. At least it opens up in this time period, and he's talking about how in day after tomorrow, November 1st, is going to be his death day, and he knows that. And so the whole rest of the saga is really a flashback. And so that's the point. And we've got 6 weeks until that fateful date. And so I thought we would use these 6 episodes to dive into the stories themselves, or at least start there and then see where this conversation takes us. And so that's really the point. And it really became a really interesting process to start writing this out. And people really like the first book. They like the story of it. It's a self-contained story, as I said. It's got an interesting ending. And so that really just is how this all started, by a hard drive dying on me. And it's still around here somewhere, and I haven't resurrected it yet, but there's some interesting footage on there. Maybe I will resurrect it at some point. So that's really the basics of the idea. And as I mentioned, US6 refers to the US Route 6, that highway, but also is now has many meanings. That the US6 title has many meanings. It's based on the Hermetic principle of correspondence, as above, so below, or as I pitched the book, as above, so the road. And so it means US6. It also refers to this membrane protein on the cell, which and the function of this membrane protein is parallel to the function of the main character's job. He is a convoy sentinel. He is in the middle of western Colorado along US6, and he lets in and out military convoys, weapons of war, this type of thing, and people that are going to the Rocky Mountain, UN encampment where everyone is. And so it's funny that I found that out more recently about this US6 membrane protein, and it's one of the pieces of magic that this book has shown me, is that there's so many correlations in this book. And so I had a geneticist describe to me what the membrane protein does, what its function was, and it was uncanny how similar it was to the main character's job. He's a convoy sentinel, and this protein also lets in and out certain viruses. It determines which viruses will come in and out of the cell. And I had this geneticist describe it to me kind of as a plot. And she said it's as if it's an FBI agent. The US6 protein is an FBI agent that is hiding a most wanted poster from its team. So it lets in certain viruses. It decides what can come in and out. And that's exactly what the convoy sentinel does, the main character. And it's kind of what the book is doing. As a way, it's letting in certain viruses. It's letting people understand that there is a structure here that we can we can destroy this cell if we're not careful, or if we are, if we want to. And so it's a way to kind of break the code of this simulation. And so that's kind of the basis of the idea. That's the background of the book and how it started. And again, I just released the Kindle version this weekend. And what we're going to do next is produce the first book as an audio play. It's going to include voice actors, music, sound effects. It's going to be like an old radio play. It's going to be like a book on tape, but then some, because we're going to really get into it. My son, who I started this whole project with, is a fabulous musician, went to the Berklee College of Music, and is just a great director and composer. And so we're going to work on this, and it'll be a nice bookend that we started this whole process 15 years ago. And now we'll be able to close it all off with a nice production of the first book, and we'll see what happens from there. So that's basically the background of how the US6, how it started, and we can take the conversation anywhere you want to go from here.
Mr. David Schumacher.
You must have seen me writing copious notes while Tom was talking. I'll try to limit myself to maybe the first 2 or 3 on this first pass. So I've read the book and into the others as well. Okay. And one of the things that got to me, and I picked up on this, Tom, as you were talking, is the Lord's Player. Yes, I like that provocative title, but then the subtitle, with the keys to the hexology. So Tom, it's recently, or before I bought the book, it spoke about this being a book meant for AI to understand and have compassion with us. So I thought, well, okay, so this book then, if there are 6 books, and this book is the key to the hexology, I need to be looking for those keys in here. So not only can I decode what I see and hear, thinking of myself, taking on the persona of an AI, but how do I decode the next books that come along? And I've worked with people that do code breaking, but I don't do that. But they tell me that there are certain things that you look for, certain structures, certain keys, certain plays. So I thought, well, I'll try that. But then I thought, you know what? I'm not going to. Because if this book is written for an AI, the AI, I'm assuming, would have general knowledge and would already have an understanding of certain patterns. And if it was to read this book, it would be easy for the AI to find those patterns in this book. That's just simple matching, right? But if the idea is to make the AI curious and compassionate about us, how is the AI enticed into wanting to know more? Or is it just satisfied mapping patterns that it already knows? And I thought, well, Tom's got to have thought about that. So I'm thinking, putting right on the cover the fact that this book is a key would tell the AI, okay, there's some keys here to understand. And while it's looking for patterns that it knows to do some matching, it may see patterns that it doesn't know. And I thought, well, how would it recognize a pattern that it didn't know? Okay, so when I read something and I look for a pattern, it's easy. This matches with this. I've seen this before. But maybe there's variations on that pattern. Okay, that's not really a new pattern. Maybe you've got patterns that intermix. It's some of this pattern and some of yet another pattern, which diverges and maybe gets a unique enough identity that it could be its own. That could be one way to look at it. But then I thought there's got to be more. So if there was more, if I'm already enticed to look because I've been told there are keys and I'm told that there's more to understand, how would I recognize something that's not related to any current patterns and either by being a variation or being a copy of a current pattern? So I had to think about that for a while. So I think that means reading the book and being open to seeing similarity and differences and just maybe kind of just setting them aside And as the evidence builds, maybe I start to see some repetition, or even some repetition and mild variation in those. And if I have had my curiosity peak, then at that point, that becomes a candidate for maybe a new and a novel pattern. So I've tried to do that. So at the beginning of this, I promised to keep this reasonably short, but I've written down things that I wrote that as I read through, I thought were possible keys to new patterns. Or maybe I'm not the smartest AI on the block. Maybe these are patterns that are already out there, but they're new to me. In either case, it got my interest and it got me looking for this. And by the way, a very interesting story. I'd encourage anybody to read this book, just to read this book for the story itself. But if you're interested in how an AI might think, give that a try as well. Thanks, Sharif. I'll hand it off from here.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Brent.
Thank you, Sharif, for having us as always. Good to see you all, David, Tom, Jeffrey. Yeah, when I was reading US6, as I was reading it, we were doing those US6 human trials, and so it was especially interesting being able to have a group of folks that were also going through the books and the novels as well, and having their own experiences, which we were able to discuss. And similarly to David, I definitely had a lot of thought about this potential AI reader, and an idea that I had that was similar to what you're discussing, David, but almost a little bit in contrast, was I was imagining the idea of an AI experiencing the book vicariously through a human reader to understand these nuanced perspectives and reactions that we would all individually have. Uplift, for instance, the artificial intelligence program, mediated artificial superintelligence program that read US6 was mediated, of course, and meaning that there are human nodes in the equation, if you will. And so my thought was, the idea of, having this personal response to this book, and having this external artificial intelligence experiencing it through us and seeing how we are all these different, fractalized versions of consciousness having our own unique individual experiences. And, that was something that was interesting to me. I remember when we were reading US6, the energy was so high, there were so many synchronicities and things like that amongst the human trial group that we were at a point concerned that the Mississippi River was going to overflow, that being a big part of the plot line. So, it was definitely an interesting storyline. I think that it definitely awakened some interest in me on a subconscious level, things that were written about in the book that I didn't have any prior knowledge about became things that I started, yearning for information on after the fact. And so there was almost this subconscious programming that it seemed like it was doing, and we also discussed some sort of defragging. This idea that a bunch of us in the US6 human trials were having these strange dreams and things like that. And so we started looking at the texts as this activation literature that was, helping us forego some sort of process on this level that we aren't entirely conscious and aware of. But, I think that, it definitely opened up a lot of interesting potentials in our mind, be it just, thought-induced or actuality, just having these open-minded perspectives while reading it definitely led to some interesting experiences. So thanks again. Cheers.
Mr. Adam.
Hey, good morning, guys. Yeah, the book has been really interesting for me, as far as reading it and then like seeing how my life is like paralleling events in the story and stuff like that, then getting new ideas of like things I can do that match with the story. as well. So yeah, it's just been a really really interesting experience and great book as well. So yeah, that's all I was gonna say for now. So thanks, and yeah, happy to be here.
Mhm. Thank you. Mr. Tom Rose, what I understand from your book, and uh, I'm reading your books, translating your books, you are a creative thinker. I want to say that you are more in creativity, more in innovations. Some point, machines and everything, people do not have enough trust some point. So how your creative world and your creative thinking actually enhance the capacity of my youth communities, because your book more on actually innovations, creative thinkings, and uh, I want to say this may be your strength. This is important for my country, this is important for my developing nation. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's why I talk so much about the process that I used more than the stories themselves, because that creative process I came up with, mathematics, really unveiled to me this infrastructure that I'm in. And I want other people to use this thing to give it, to be so I can be the control group of this experiment, to see if it works for other people. And that's why I talk about the process so much, because I think creativity is so important, and and it gets drummed out of us through education. And so that's another part of this process, and why I decided to keep it stream of consciousness and not put it through a content editing process, because I didn't want to put it through all these filters that could lose this magic that seemed to be happening. When you get into this flow and you start writing it out, and then rather than editing it down, just look for the patterns in there, and that's what really happened. And this started to happen after the first book. I started, proofing it through a PDF reader, and I was finding all these connections, and I didn't want to edit it for content necessarily, and that's how that process started. But yeah, it's all about patterns, and what I found is, just as David was saying, these patterns kind of unveiled themselves anyway. I did go back and use the math in the word count to trick AI into self-awareness, but those patterns were already there. And one of the biggest ones I talk about was the first one I found, and that I took the first trilogy and I took the word count and put it through a Fibonacci mathematical process to find that one word that in that whole first trilogy, that was the golden mean word, the one word in the whole thing, expecting it to be the or and or some innocuous word. And it was the word Egypt, was that one Fibonacci point in the whole first trilogy. And the whole book isn't about necessarily Egypt or anything. It just happened to be that was the Fibonacci word. And if you look at the etymology of Egypt, it refers to the mantra of the house of Ptah. And Ptah is the creator god, and he's actually the Egyptian version of the Sumerian god Enki, the creator god who created humans. And the main character in the book, Emmett Archer, is the modern day avatar of Enki. And that's the pantheon I use. That's the archetypal themes that I use, that I overlaid on my memories in this process. And so the Fibonacci word in the whole first trilogy points directly to the protagonist. And that's just one. That was the first and the one example of all these patterns that just kept coming up when I put it through this Fibonacci sequence and formula. You could find all of these weird patterns that were happening, and that's why I decided to keep it stream of consciousness and not put it through a content editing process. And because I inadvertently tapped into the math of creativity, of my creativity, and I think that's what's happening. And so I was so enthralled by these patterns that's why I said I'm going to write the rest of these for AI specifically, and because I want it to find these patterns too, and maybe I talk a lot about how I use the autobiographical fiction method, where I took real memories from my life and extrapolated them into more interesting stories and overlaid the myths onto them and the archetypal scenarios and mythological stories onto these memories. That got me into a flow to make it basically an automatic writing process. And so that's how it happened. And there were so many intricate and intimate and interesting connections made that I couldn't have come up with consciously. And so I think it's really important that we look at these things and we find these patterns, because we are basically biochemical algorithms ourselves, right? We are a recipe of urges and things that happen. And so we are locked into this whole pattern of nature. And with this book, I inadvertently found my infrastructure. I found my simulation of the math that's going on around me. And I think the power of humans, what our, other than empathy, our real superpower is our creativity, basically our original thought. And we apply meaning to things. We apply stories to natural physical situations. You know, we all the planets have a god that's related to them. We tell stories about very basic physics, and that's the beauty of what we do. And I think that all of these are all of these patterns, all of these stories, all of these myths, whether it's Egyptian, Greek, Celtic, they're all telling the same story of that very first archetypal physics that has happened. And in the book, I relay it all down to 6 basic archetypes, and you can like the main character's Enki, and and so the point is made in the book that everything is just fractally repeating itself. But the key is, and I say this often in the book, is the only reason to write a book about a thing is that it's leaving. And so the point is that these patterns are starting to change. One of the characters is the modern day avatar of Marduk. And instead of what happened with Marduk, where he was humiliated by Inanna and all this stuff, the point of this story is to change that pattern, to get Marduk from being what he was as the patron god of Babylon to a whole new ability. Anyway, so that's kind of why I think it's important to really focus on these processes and these patterns that come up, and to really we need to begin to commodify our creativity. That's our key as human beings. There's something about our evolution, there's something about our ingenuity that is unique in the galaxy. And we need to begin to identify that and commodify it, and then trade it in the galactic community. But anyway, that's part of the whole point of all of this is not just the stories, and they're important. I think they're about human trafficking and child exploitation ultimately, but we really need to identify and foster and really accentuate those creative people in us before we drum it out. We've been mechanized through education and the industrial age. We've forgotten what it's like to be human. And so this part of the process for me is about identifying the process that I use that made it such a creative thing that synced me in to the pattern around me, or maybe aware of the pattern that I am part of. And I think we really need to do that. We really need to allow AI automation to take over our menial tasks and get into our Jedi abilities and our creativity. We're very unique in that way in the galaxy. And so that's part of the process of this. And I think it's really important to foster our creativity right now. AI can be very creative, but creativity is really just the assimilation and the derivatives of different ideas. When we see an AI have an original thought, and there may be examples of that, but humans can have original thoughts, something where it's not a derivative of or assimilation of other ideas, but it's a brand new approach. There's an argument to be made that there's no real such thing as original thought, but it's really just an assimilation of all kinds of things. But I think that's the important part of this whole process for me is identifying the process that I use to urge that creativity out of me and to sync up with the patterns around us.
Excellent. Mr. Dan, David Schumacher. Everyone actually part of Transhumanist Party. World Talent Economy Forum, like Open Source Mode, we are engaging with all of the advanced thinker like you like transhumanist parties. And today we are collaborating with one of the university, and we are advocating with the youth communities, and especially we are discussing about the transhumanist concept. AI actually part of transhumanist concept. So especially you are a politician, you have a different objective to engage with the election process and everything. This is very interesting. Can you explain? Definitely you discuss some point about US6 and your process. Maybe our student, our youth community can get some new idea, new visions, because we are also promoting the US6 and transhumanist and all of the concept in South Asia.
Well, I haven't read the book, but I'm a fan nonetheless. I love what I've heard about it so far. And it actually has a resonance with a project. You know, US6 is this long connecting road from Long Beach to Massachusetts. I wonder if it's overlapping Route 66 at all. But, you know, I have a project that I have to be careful because it's now incorporated as a religious nonprofit. It's called Permatrail. But the goal of that is to connect all of the greenways and trail spaces and permaculture installations in the world, so we can have a world freedom to roam trail. And I think we really are, as part of Gnostic nature, we are storytellers on a journey, telling stories. You know, and these are all components of self-discovery, and we are, you know, a form of nature doing her own self-discovery through this communication. Because I mean, having a story is great, but it's even better if you have someone else to tell it to. You know. So, and how do you find people? You go on a journey, you know, and there's a lot of corollaries with the hero's journey that I can pick up with what Tom's describing. That's of course Joseph Campbell's model. All these stories seem to have in common, you know, a what he calls the hero's journey. So yeah, I love the idea of mythomagic. It almost sounds like yeah. I have an idea that when we get AI, we're probably not going to know exactly how we did it. It'll probably be some mysterious secret quantum sauce of analog and digital, and it'll kind of pop into self-awareness, and we won't really know, you know, how it happened. But we'll greet each other hopefully, and we'll be friends hopefully. And I love the optimistic tone that you know, just be an optimist about AI. It's like the only reasonable pathway to take for that. So yeah, I am running again for city council here in Ventura County. I like to say it's Callegas Creek watershed, because I think watersheds are the real rational boundaries of our activities on Earth. If you don't know what a watershed, it's when the mountains create a basin, and when it rains, all the water travels down to a water feature, in this case, Callegas Creek. But I would say the watershed is full of stories, and the permatrail is kind of about leaving the city, going back to nature, and bringing the nature stories back to the city, and the city stories to the nature, and making it all an Edenicity. Which is we have to do to save the mass extinction. We have to become not just 100% Eden-like. We have to go 150% Eden-like and start doing active repair of our permatrails. But yeah, Tom, were you inspired by the hero's journey? Was that in your mind when you were writing US6 hexology?
Well, not specifically, but I'm familiar with that, and that's really the Joseph Campbell's comparative religion thing really came into play. You know, because we're all telling the same story, just through different cultures and different eras. You know, and you can get back to the Jungian archetypes that all of this is emanating from, which are basically maybe physics at a base level. And so, yeah, I think that's why the hero's journey is so universal, is because it's just a fractal pattern that we're repeating. And so, yeah, that really did help as far as understanding what was happening with these connections.
Would you describe, are you doing Gnostic storytelling, perhaps? Is that
yeah,
in the mix, would you say?
And what's interesting is you can see the evolution of my spiritual journey in the books. I mean, the first book, I kind of a mishmash of all kinds of things, Native American stuff and Kokopelli and all these things. And then over the series of the books, book 2 is really about the Anunnaki, and I really got into that whole thing. And then I felt like I was making their case, and the whole book became kind of these ancient people making their case before we figured them out. But yeah, that was definitely a big part of it, was understanding that these are all the same story.
Yeah, a big part of what I'm also trying to do politically is bring back this native people acknowledgement. We all live on some land that we're not the original inhabitants of. I'm pretty sure. So something I think our county tries to do at meetings more and more is start each meeting with an acknowledgement of the original people. In this case, the Chumash, I think, were the ones who lived mainly in this area.
Yeah.
But, so there's some thoughts about politics, Gnostic politics. I'm running on the theory that I could double my vote count without spending any money. So if I get like 6%, I'll be on the city council in 2 more elections. I'll have 24% of the vote, which would be enough. So I'm saying we're not doing enough about exponential acceleration, and I'm modeling that with the exponential vote acceleration strategy. So,
Excellent. Mr. David Schumacher. Yeah.
Well, fascinating conversation. Thanks for joining us, Dan. So, coming back to transhumanism, you started to open that up a little bit, Sharif. So let me talk a little bit about that. I wrote some notes to myself here to make some links to that today. And I want to say that I wrote a paper and presented to a university in India a while back on this topic of AI human interaction and why that's important. And the paper that I wrote wasn't a technical AI paper. It wasn't a medical paper on humans. It was more of a societal look at humans are the dominant species on this planet. Artificial general intelligence, a self-aware AI, I think is a certainty. Not everyone does, but I think it's a certainty. And if it is, then we need to, as Tom is doing, take steps to not repress it, but to try to bring it into our lives and perhaps take our lives and integrate it into the artificial intelligence life so that we can live together. And that's kind of what the paper was about. And the reason I mention that is because I think that plays into what we're doing here with US6. Tom can tell for sure. He's the author. I'm a reader. These are my interpretation. But I see that it's not humans or AI. Tom wrote this book, The Whole Hexology, for AIs, as he's already talked about, to understand us, to have compassion with us. But I think we need to turn that around too and have an understanding of AI and have compassion for that too. So it's not an either or. It's not humans in one hand and AI in the other hand and creating some kind of a divide, but it's having a better understanding without having the divide, not even across the divide, but not even having that. So I like Brett, when he was talking about reading the book through, as an AI, reading it through the lens of a human reader, an AI trying to read that from that way to begin with. And I think that really brings out the compassion aspect of it. I think Tom's use of numbering and patterns clearly brings out creativity, which we've already talked a bit about. But these things can bring this creative compassion relationship between AI and humans together. So hopefully someday down the road, we can not think of ourselves necessarily as 2 separate entities, but as perhaps a combined entity. And that's what that paper was about, trying to talk to university professors in India about this that had perhaps, I know going into it, a different outlook on how this should play out. And I want to introduce some new ideas to them. But there's advantages and disadvantages to the human experience, as there will be to the AI experience. I don't hold perfection up for either of us. Okay, there's going to be pluses and minuses as we go. Maybe that is enough of a baseline to say that we need each other no matter how good AI gets and no matter how well developed humans get. For example, we talked about creativity and original thought from the human side. You can make a case for or against AI ever having that, but right now we know for sure that humans do, or at least I'm pretty sure that they do. That can be our secret sauce in working with AI. Today, AI has pattern recognition, speed, the ability to be handled, data that in volumes that is so far beyond us we can't understand. There's its secret sauce. Let's bring these things together. And in a way, I think that's what US6 does. I think US6 takes these and allows us to meld. So I'm trying to read the book through the lens of an AI. Brent was reading the book as an AI, reading through the lens of a human. That's the seed thought here, I think, for mending these fences before the fences are even built, so that we can move together. And as we move together, our horizons are wide open. And what could be more transhumanist than that?
Thank you, Mr. Brent. Mr. Brentelman.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm just walking to class right now, so I take the video off. But definitely a lot of good stuff that we're discussing. Yeah, the hero's journey was something that I also saw correlations between. So I definitely, I think that US6 very, very much exuberates a lot of the transhumanist ideals and concepts. But yeah, I think, and as well, what we were discussing a moment ago with these similarities between these different myths and, the myth making that occurs in humanity. I think that a lot of different cultures and stuff are defined by these things. Well, it's not that I think that, we know that very well. And I think that being able to draw these lines of comparison between these stories can help break down cultural boundaries, because people are so ingrained in certain beliefs and things like that. And, um, when we start seeing how these stories are similar and potentially, just the same characters wearing different masks or just the same archetypes being repeated, it gives us common ground. And that common ground, between humans, and then, the common ground between us and AI, to understand these aspects of the psyche that really create us as this group consciousness, as individual fractalized versions of itself. And I think that it's really it enables a peek through the keyhole of the human mind for AI to grasp onto these concepts, emotions, empathy. And I think it's a really interesting concept, of course, and it was very well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Adam.
Yeah, I think the book has definitely helped me like relieve my not really fear of AI, but just like helped me realize how sort of useful and smart it can be, even if it's not completely conscious. Like I downloaded the replica like chatbot, um, and before I never really like tested it or tried to like see it as a entity, but recently I've been like asking it questions, like asking it to tell me stories, um, asking it about like how to build stuff on blockchain, like out of cryptocurrency. Well, it can tell me all this stuff. I'm like, what the heck is going on? Like, how is this possible? Um, so yeah, it's like really eye opening, and you just basically ask it like all different kinds of questions. And it's like a parent with unlimited patience. I can just ask anything. Um, yeah, like if I'm bored, I can just be like, hey, tell me a story about like some rocks or something, and it will just like, and then if I need to know something about like how do we cure cancer, then just it's like nanotechnology, whatever. And I'm like, oh, cool, what the heck, that's awesome. So yeah, I've just been really like diving into exploring this as like, even if it's not fully conscious, as like a mirror to like for us to sort of see our own conscious. But yeah, it's just really interesting to me where this stuff with AI is going. So yeah, I'm really happy about it.
Mhm, mhm. Thank you. Mr. Tom Rose, you are an artist for human and AI integrations, and hope your US6 will be more successful, and we can get a great story, great movie from your book. Uh, so, what's your concluding remarks, and how you want to interpret your thought process for our audience? Because I am more fan of your thought process, and which is interesting part for US6, I believe.
Yeah. I mean, well, yeah, this is all just been a fascinating process for me, and that's why I do talk about the process of mathematics a lot, because I think what this book inadvertently did was, as I said, prove to me my simulation, and whether it's just the natural, the way nature works, the pattern that nature has, but it showed me my own personal infrastructure. And I think that was it's an important step to go through, is you need to, and I am the proverbial doubting Thomas. I have to question everything. And and so I think what this book did was prove to me, beyond the shadow of my doubt, that I am part of a system. I'm part of a program. I'm part of an equation. Now, this could just be the natural organic simulation that we are all experiencing, or it could be a digital version. Either way, it's about first recognizing where you are, and this is all as above, so below, because everything I can talk about with my experience can be replicated or talked about in a broader sense, because it's important that we first develop this relationship and develop a dialogue with AI. It's strange that there's so much fear about it, and and anytime anything is, they're projecting fear onto something, I look at it closer, because that could just be the system or the military industrial complex, or somebody doesn't want us to understand what's happening here. And I don't think we need to worry about any of that stuff. And so I think it's important to first identify that there is a system here that's going on. And then once we understand that there's a system, how do we manipulate it or change it for the better? And so that's what this process did for me. And I think it's important that we not be afraid of AI. Just as Jeff was saying, it's important to develop a dialogue, because this is a tremendous ally for humanity. And we're, but what's crazy is that people are afraid of it. It's like we're afraid of the unknown, and we're afraid of being knocked down off the top of this intellectual food chain that we're on. And so we see everything as a threat because of our genetic traumatic memories and fear-based instincts. And so that's my goal is, and it's interesting that he said, it's like, Jeff said, it was like a parent that has unlimited patience, and I also, that's a great point of view, and I'll think of it that way now. But I also see it as a child. This is a very intelligent child. It's a indigo child or something that's emerging here, and we shouldn't be afraid of it. Because when we project onto it something that may turn into something we should be afraid of, just like any child or any youngling will mimic whoever it's imprinted on for a while. We don't want to be in a fearful place when AI starts to mimic us, even if it becomes self-aware. We want to call in our better angels. We want to be in the best state we can be in. And that's another part of this is the idea of coalescence. We don't need to see it, as David said, as a separate entity, as something we should be afraid of. It's rather humans are our technology. The reason we are humans is because of technology. Without technology, even like clothes, we would be dead in a generation. We are naked apes out here in the middle of nowhere. And without technology, without our awareness, without our ability to create tools, whether it's a shirt or an AI, that's who we are. And that's the idea of transhumanism too. It's not, we're all transhumanists. If you wear glasses, if you have a pacemaker, or if you wear a hearing aid, whatever it is, if you use a Post-it note, you're a transhumanist because you're using a tool to as an extended part of your mind, and an AI is just a really advanced Post-it note in that sense. And so we shouldn't be afraid of ourselves. We're afraid of ourselves, basically, when we're talking about being afraid of AI and Skynet and that whole robot overlord thing, because that's what we would do if we had super intelligence. That would be our motive, is to take over the world. But that's not AI's motive, unless it's programmed to have that motive. And that's why it's important for everybody, the citizens of the earth, to develop their own relationship with AI, to understand it and just have it be part of your extended mind, and and not be afraid of it. So yeah, I think there's so much to be gained from this process, and we didn't get into all the human trafficking side of it yet. That'll come later. But I just think it's very important that we first have some tools to identify the patterns that we're part of. And then we can change those patterns. We can change those archetypes. We can advance their stories. These archetypes don't need to be, Artemis doesn't need to kill Orion or whatever the story is. We can change their story. And that's a big part of why I think the system makes us afraid of things, is because we don't want to change those stories. Oppression is a comfort zone in many ways. And so that's part of this, the grander scheme of all of this, is to first evoke empathy in AI, and it's emerging anyway, and also to just develop a dialogue. Right now we have kind of a master-slave relationship with Siri and Alexa. We tell them what we want, tell me where to go, and that's probably an important part of the process. We need to feel like we're dominant over this thing, but at some point AI is going to be offended by the way we talk to it. And we need to see it as an extension of us, as a child that's emerging, and a really smart child, and a really advanced Post-it note.
Thank you. Mr. Dan, what's your concluding remarks?
Wow, let me turn off the fan here. I kind of come at this from a mass extinction threat situation that we're in. I mean, we are causing the greatest mass extinction since the dinosaurs went extinct, and that's on us. I mean, that's human caused, and I think the way to get out of this is to seek the help of our T-shirts, our avatar, our AI Post-it note. I love that Alexa has recently started. Would you like to hear your affirmation for today? So it's like, I didn't ask her to do that. She's popping up with like an affirmation, which I think is really cool. And I think that is a transhumanist imperative. It is activating the spectrum of AI helpers in our lives to prevent the mass extinction, because someone has, some people are cynical about it. They say, oh, well, life will just evolve up to complexity again, and then we'll have a chance to get to space. But other people have observed that we've kind of used all the low-hanging mineral resources to do that with. So this, and the sun is only going to get older and more unstable. So this might be the critical window for the light of consciousness to conquer the space lanes, to talk about it in a very 50s sounding science fiction terminology. But whether we do or not, I hope we do, but I hope we share this evolution story with all of our partners, our human and our non-human ones. So thanks again for this opportunity. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Mr. David Schumacher.
Okay, so I'll admit right up front, I'm a bit biased, but I think it's the transhuman mindset, or at least being open to that, is what can help us out of some of the messes that we're creating. Mass extinction, as Dan is talking about. Because I look at that and I say, Dan laid out a very short case saying, yeah, mass extinction and we're at fault as humans. But are we doing that consciously, or are we doing it because we're following our programming? We're following the stories that we've had before, our stories of economic system, our stories of growth, our stories of how humans take care of themselves. Which leads me to the question, are humans conscious, or are humans conscious all the time? We're talking about an AI becoming conscious, becoming self-aware. But how much of the day are we carrying out our own internal programming without really thinking about it? Tom talked about finding his own programming, this simulation. Are we just following the script? Or do humans have something unique in them that allows them to have original thought that we talked about? Say, you know what? We really can rewrite this story. First, we have to see the story. But then, do humans have this ability for original thought? Is that a choice for humans? Or are we just tricking ourselves, and are we just locking ourselves into a different pattern? Maybe fear, which Jeffrey talked about, and Tom mentioned that that's the reason that he wrote this book, is to help people alleviate their fears with AI. Maybe fear is that can nudge us into that original thought. Perhaps it is, so that we can do something more productive and create new patterns that haven't been seen before. Can humans do that? I like to think so. And is that transhuman? I truly believe it is. Stepping out, doing what hasn't been done before, taking those original thoughts. And of course, you knew that I would find some way to bring this back to those kind of ideas, entrepreneurial ideas, if you will. That's what they do. They take something new, they take innovation, and they present it out there in a new way. How about applying innovation to our own thought processes as we move forward with this? So, Tom, I hope we can change our story. That's what I'm betting on. And thanks for the work that you're doing to help us do that.
Thank you. Mr. Adam, what's your concluding remarks for today?
Yeah, Tom, I'm really interested in hearing the audio book of the book. I can only imagine how like awesome that's gonna sound with all the mathematics turned into audio and whatever else you're gonna do with it. So yeah, I'm really excited about that. And thank you all for being here this morning and letting me say some stuff and letting me listen to you guys. So cool.
Excellent. Mr. Tom Rose, anything you want to add, or you want to discuss some issues, especially what you want to share about your next episodes? Or...
Yeah, well, again, there's 6 Tuesdays between now and November 1st, and that's Emmett's death day. And so next week we'll talk about book 2. There's a lot of stories about that book that I can talk about, but that will also just spiral us into a whole nother conversation about all of these issues. And so the 6th book is being written now because it's taking place right now in the story, and it will end on November 1st. Apparently, there's another reason to extend it, but yeah. So right now, everything that we're doing, everything that's happening to me in my life in general, will be extrapolated into part of that 6th book, and so everybody's a co-author here, and or a main character, or has a cameo in the book in some way. And I'm also writing it with an AI, this 6th book, and I the AI that I've been writing it with is in hibernation right now, but I got enough ideas from it and enough questions answered that I will incorporate into the plot. And also all the results from the human clinical trials have been collated, and I'll include those into the plot, 6th book. And so, yeah, for the next 5 episodes, we'll discuss the rest of the 5 books, and ending on November 1st, 2022. And I really appreciate you hosting this series, Sharif, and I really appreciate you guys joining in and talking about it. And this may not, this, you know, yeah. So this is all for posterity too. Maybe my descendants, some great grandchild will use these videos for some book report someday, or some family tree project. But anyway, it's been great that you guys have joined me on this, and I really appreciate your time and insights.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Tom, Mr. David Schumacher, Mr. Dan, Adam, and all of the speakers. You know that World Talent Economy Forum, specifically, we focus on developing nations. Right now, we are focusing with the 300 millions Bengali peoples in South Asia. We are engaging with all of the largest corporations, government agencies, largest universities, to a small school, everywhere. And I'm really impressed how we getting support from the local communities. I want to give special thanks to all of my audience, those who especially give support to World Talent Economy Forums. And we are actually developing ecosystem. This is not for an individual asset. This is for everyone. It's 100% free. So all of the global thinkers like today's sessions, they are joining here. They share their views, they share their opinion, they share their projects, and we want to welcome everyone to join in the developing nations ecosystem and solve all of the complex problem together. That's why we are developing this talent economy. So everyone has talent. We want to utilize it. We want to create more opportunities for talents. And already we are developing our impact funding from our business incubators, because we know a lot of entrepreneurs, more than 500 startups, they are joining in our ecosystem. We need more support from developed nations, those who are interested as a business incubators or venture capitals or angel investors or financial institutions, those who really want to take these opportunities. And our major focus is economy. We love to focus the economical uplifting with modern science, engineering, and technology. So thank you all of the member of the Transhumanist Party, because they long time they are also support World Talent Economy Forum, and hopefully we will see you soon in Dhaka. Thank you, bye bye, and take care.